The market has cooled, and many of us realtors had expected that it would mean it would get easier to help our buyers get the home of their dreams. But there is so much weirdness happening in the market. That struggle has continued longer than we expected. Honestly, I was ready for the market to shift. It was insane for too long, and getting back to some kind of normal was my dream. And believe me, all agents feel this way. But we're not there yet. I'm still seeing 5 things that are making it very hard for both buyers and sellers in this market. You've seen all the headlines, and I'm going to tell you what it really looks like in day-to-day life working with buyers. The first thing that's making it difficult is that sellers think their homes are worth way more money than they are. There was a house listed last week for $100,000 over the most recent similar sale in the neighborhood. It did go under contract, even though it took about 35 days to get there, so who knows what it eventually sold for. It's not closed yet. The good news is we can absolutely tell you if a home is overpriced or not. I'm seeing more that are overpriced in this market, but that's definitely not always the case. A little bit of research and you'll know what kind of offer is reasonable to make regardless of the list price. The next thing I'm seeing is that inventory is still insanely low. I've got 4 active buyers right now looking in 4 different cities, and every one of them has come up against multiple offers, even though the percentage of homes with multiple offers has dropped a lot, like a lot. But the most desirable homes are still competitive. If it's in a really great neighborhood and in really good condition and priced appropriately, we're still seeing multiple offers. As of the day I'm writing this video script, we have 2.13 months of inventory on the market. There were 1,178 closed sales from November 5th through December 5th, and we currently have 2,489 properties active on the market in Wake County. Yes, I know this is based on backward-looking data, but the fact is that the data has not changed one bit in the last 3 months. Inventory is not increasing in the triangle right now. It did increase a very little bit in September, but it sat at 2 months of inventory ever since then, and it's not making it easier to buy a house. I mean, it's a little easier, but we're still generally only talking about 2 to 3 offers on properties that are getting multiples, not 10 or 15. And like I said, the percentage of homes getting multiples is way down, so it's easier, but it's not as easy as many buyers think it should be. You would think that if a property is sitting on the market for a week or 3 weeks, that means it's overpriced, right? And you can just swoop in and give them a lowball offer that they'd be glad to take, right? But look at this. Sold at full list price. Sold at full list price. This house was on the market for 23 days. They pulled it off, relisted it. 4 days later, it sold for $22,000 over list price with competing offers. The average days on the market for homes in Wake County with competing offers when they went under contract was 15 days. But there were homes on the market for a lot longer than that sold with competing offers. The highest days on market for a property with competing offers was 123 days. That means that after 123 days, they got more than one offer at the same time. That home did not drop its price in all that time, and it sold for $5,000 over list. The COVID market trained us to believe that if a home didn't sell in the first weekend, it was way overpriced because everything sold in the first weekend. The truth is that it takes about 10 showings to sell a house. So if it takes a couple weeks to get 10 people through the door, that doesn't mean the house is overpriced. That's pretty normal. Now, if you have 20 people walk through the door and the house still isn't sold, then it's overpriced. But we've just stretched out the amount of time it takes to get those 10 potential buyers in the door. Repairs are not a given. A lot of buyers right now are uncomfortable with the fact that sellers are not as willing to do repairs that come up in the inspections as they used to be. But here's the thing. In North Carolina, our contracts are very clear that the sale is as is, and the seller is not responsible to do any repairs to the property. However, you do have options. First of all, the buyer has the right to terminate the contract for any reason or for no reason at all. The cost of that termination is that you forfeit your due diligence fee. Remember, the due diligence fee buys you the right to inspect the property, and if you decide not to proceed with the purchase, the seller keeps that money. That raises 2 really big concerns. 1, how much money am I going to lose if I terminate? And 2, what are repairs likely to cost me if I don't terminate? Before I answer those questions, I want to calm some fears about this because I know this sounds really risky, but my team is incredible at showing homes. While buyers are looking at finishes and figuring out where their furniture will go, we are looking under sinks and in crawl spaces to check for things that might come up on the inspection. Now, we're not home inspectors, but you're going to have a pretty good idea of what's going to come up on that inspection before you make an offer. You're not going in blind. Regardless of what comes up on the inspection report, you've got a couple of options. First, the smartest thing to do is to negotiate the repairs with the seller. According to the contract, the seller doesn't have to do repairs, but if they waited 2 or 3 weeks to get a buyer, the odds are they don't want to wait another 2 or 3 weeks for a new buyer to come along if you decide to terminate. There's definitely room for negotiation on this, but what if negotiations really aren't a possibility? What if there was a lot of competition when you went under contract and the seller doesn't have a mortgage on the property and they're willing to let it fall out of contract? Your other option is to terminate the contract and forfeit your due diligence. If the due diligence date has not yet passed, you have the right to get your earnest money back. Unless there's something really squirrely going on, it should be no problem. So you've got to think about this. We're seeing due diligence amounts way lower than they were early in the year, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 on competitive properties and lower when there aren't other offers. To make this decision, you just need to get a quote on the price of the repair and see which is greater. If you're looking at a $2,000 plumbing repair, you're probably not going to want to terminate for that. When I bought my house, the plumbing inspector recommended replacing all the downstairs plumbing fittings because of a failure in that type of fitting. The cost was the same as doing all new plumbing in the downstairs, and that was a $3,500 repair. In just about every purchase, unless you're looking at something very new, there are repairs that come up on the report. When you're budgeting for your home purchase, adding in 1% of the purchase price for potential repairs is really smart. Usually $3,000 to $6,000 is a safe high average. If you don't have to pay the repairs and you're able to get the seller to take on some of it, then you've got some cash set aside for other things that come up when you buy a new house. Like, when you need to replace your washer and dryer because it wouldn't fit through the door of your old laundry room, so you just left it at your old house. No, just me? How does a washer and dryer fit in a laundry room, but then you can't get it back out? The universe is a strange and wonderful place. We have seen some crazy stuff with appraisals. An agent friend of mine recently got an appraisal on one of her listings that came in at $100,000 under what they had planned to list at. So she got another appraisal, and that one came in $100,000 over what they planned to list at. That's an outlier type of situation, but appraisals can be wild cards right now, depending on the property. If it's a more unique property, that makes it even more difficult. But here's something that you need to understand about an appraisal. An appraisal is one person's opinion of what a home is worth on one day. That's it. And with all the craziness surrounding prices, there are two things making it difficult to get an accurate appraisal. First, remember that low inventory we talked about a few minutes ago? Low inventory makes it a nightmare to get an accurate appraisal because appraisals are supposed to be based on what has sold recently that's similar to the subject property. But when nothing like it sold recently in a 2-mile radius, what is the appraiser supposed to do? Well, they can go further away from the house, but then is that really an accurate representation? I mean, if you have to drive 10 more minutes to get to the store, doesn't that have an impact on what you're willing to pay for a house? And of course, they can make price adjustments for location, but you tell me, how much is a 10-minute drive to the store worth to you? Seriously, how much? Like $5,000? 10,000? You can see that these are very subjective things, and subjective things are hard to put a price on. The second thing that's making appraisals difficult is emotion and fear. I could do a whole video just on appraisals and how they work, but right now I'll just say that if you're getting a mortgage, the appraiser doesn't work for you. They work for the lender. Yes, even though you are paying for the appraisal and even though you are paying for the mortgage, the appraiser works for the mortgage company. That means that the appraisers have to keep a lot of people happy. The buyer, the seller, both realtors, the lender who's their actual boss, and the government who made a lot of regulations after 2008 that were intended to keep appraisers more honest. There are a lot of people who are going to be mad at the appraiser if it comes in anything other than at the contract price. I would not want to be an appraiser. While all these things are impacting the housing market, it's still so much easier than it was earlier this year to buy a home, but I wanted to share these things because buyers coming into the market might have expectations that are more in line with the news headlines, which are designed to get clicks, which provides income from their advertisers, but that isn't really reality for what's happening on the ground. This might change by the time you are in the market, and I'll be sure to update you when it does. If we get to the point where heavy negotiations are possible, I'm going to tell you because I've worked that kind of market and that stuff is fun. I like seeing you get a deal as much as you like seeing it. Right now, we're still seeing that sellers would rather take a home off the market than take a low price on it because we're not having those forced sales like we saw in 2008 with a lot of job losses and people with adjustable rate mortgages. Back in 2008, 35% of homes were purchased with adjustable rate mortgages. I haven't seen a single person use one in the last 3 years. Which one of these situations would freak you out the most? Tell me in the comments, and if you like this video, you might like this one too.